So talking about the impact of sexual activity, we also want to talk about STIs. Right? Also known as STDs, sexually transmitted infections or diseases. So what do we need to know? Sexually transmitted infections are diseases or infections that are transmitted during sexual activity. Does a person need to have intercourse to transmit it? No. Essentially what happens is sexually transmitted diseases or infections go through the mucous membranes of the body. So that is the membrane that protects the exits and the opening of the body, right? So there's viral sexually transmitted infections, there's bacterial sexually transmitted infections, and there's also parasite sexually transmitted infections. So we'll break each of those ones down and talk about what the differences are. One thing that's good to know is bacterial sexually transmitted infections, when they are diagnosed, you can get antibiotics and it can completely clear. Viral, a virus hacks into our body's cell and then replicates within the cell. So it's not just an antibiotic that you can take that's going to take out a viral infection. Your body has to fight it off on its own. And sometimes that's something that you carry within your body for a longer period of time, and it can resurface later on in periods of life where the body is under stress and that virus is again triggered. What are the main ways that sexually transmitted infections can be transmitted, right? So through sexual contact, right? Where body fluids are exchanged, or where the mucous membranes protecting the opening and the exits of the body are in contact. During pregnancy, sometimes sexually transmitted infections can come from the mother to the child that's growing inside of her uterus, right? Now, the uterus actually has an amazing filtration system called the placenta, so it actually can block some viruses from coming through to the child. So often if a baby is born while a mother has tested positive for a sexually transmitted infection, the baby will be tested as well. Sometimes the baby's body shows antibodies because it has got the antibodies from the mother's blood, and then often the baby's body will clear that before they're 2 years old. Not always, but sometimes that happens. So the baby looks like they test positive, but then they actually clear. There's also needles, right? Contaminated needles. We actually had a case in Grand Prairie years ago where a tattoo parlor was reusing needles and multiple people got HIV. So here's the deal. If you want to get a tattoo, if they don't seem like extremely particular, even OCD, about showing you the brand new tattoo needles, just walk out, right? It's not worth the risk. There used to be a higher risk of sexually transmitted infections being acquired from blood transfusion, but that was pre, 1990s, before they'd have the technology now and the scanning that they do to prevent contaminated blood from being in the blood bank. So you're actually more likely to be struck by lightning than you are to get sexually transmitted infection from donated blood or a blood transfusion. So what is your risk of exposure? The more people you're sexually active with, it exponentially increases your exposure risk. So if one person has sex with one person, right, your exposure is 1. But then you go to 2, it goes to 4, goes to 8, goes to 16, right? So a former US Surgeon General said, when you have sex with someone, you're actually having sex with everyone that they have had sex with for the past 10 years. And everyone they and their partners have had sex with for the last 10 years. So this is not just some random person making a claim. This is the former US Surgeon General saying, you have to be aware when you have sex with somebody, you're actually being exposed to everyone they've had sex with as well, and who they have had sex with as well. So it's a exponential increase there. An interesting fact is young people account for a substantial number of the new STI infections. So why would that be? Why would young people and teens account for such high numbers? So if we look at gonorrhea, 70% of new cases of gonorrhea come from young people under the age of 25. Now, 63% of chlamydia are young people under the age of 24. 49% of HPV, human papillomavirus, that's again young people. 26% of HIV and 20% of syphilis. And I'll get into what each of those ones are. But those are huge numbers, right? So what happens at 25, right? The brakes are more developed. Why are young people more susceptible to STIs? The brain is not fully developed, so the delayed gratification is still in development. And so that may put people in riskier situations. Here's another thing that was told to me by a pediatrician as well. Young women, their cervix, so that's that door at the end, the bottom of the uterus, is not actually fully developed until early to mid 20s either. So in teen years, that cervix actually only has a small thin layer of that mucous membrane, which is a protective layer of cells. And so this pediatrician said that as a woman gets older, that layer of protective cells gets to be like 100 cell layers thick. Young women, you're actually more susceptible to STI infection in your teens than you are in your late 20s. It's really good to know. Again, I just want to say that I'm not a doctor or a nurse on this, so go to myhealth.alberta.ca and you can get some really solid information, because as I'm talking about gonorrhea and syphilis and chlamydia, I've tried to be really nice in the pictures that I've chosen, so you're not traumatized by what you're seeing, these pictures of the STIs, and you don't have to just start randomly searching gonorrhea on your phones or on your computers. You might get some traumatizing images there or misinformation, right? We don't want to just get fear-mongering information. Go to sources that are reliable, like myhealth.alberta.ca. And if you go to that website, then you could type in the words like gonorrhea or syphilis, and then you're not only going to get a super accurate list of the symptoms, but you can also get a list of high-risk activities where this is more common to appear, these STIs. So let's talk about bacterial STIs first. So bacteria, it's like strep throat, right? That bacteria grows on top of your cells, and if you see it, you can go to a doctor, get it confirmed, or a walk-in clinic. Grand Prairie has a few walk-in clinics, and they can do STI tests for you. And if they confirm that you have a bacterial STI, they can give you an antibiotic, and that can be cleared if they catch it. So let's talk about the first one, chlamydia. Chlamydia is called the silent STI. It is the STI in Alberta with the highest rates. So it's estimated that 3 out of 4 people who have chlamydia don't even know it. Why would that be? It's a bacterial infection in the reproductive organ. So for a man, it's a lot easier to see, right? Because that reproductive organs are external. But for a woman, it's easy for that bacteria to grow hidden inside, right? Because it's not visible. The uterus, you're not taking a look and examining the uterus. The bacteria can get up in the uterus, in the fallopian tubes, into the ovaries, and it can cause extensive damage and scarring. So I know people who've had chlamydia for years and didn't know it, and then they finally got tested. Then they found out, and the doctor said, you know what, I'm really sorry. You've had this infection for years and it's damaged your reproductive system, your fallopian tube, and your ovaries. You have a very low chance of getting pregnant. So here's the thing. If you feel bold enough and you've weighed your risk and your reward and you decided that you're going to take the risk to be sexually active, you need to be bold enough to go get tested. You need to be bold enough to go to an STI clinic, because you don't want to have something like this, the silent STI, that has infection rates in the thousands in Alberta, living in your internal organs for years, right? And also be transmitting that to other people. It can cause unusual discharge, white, yellow infection, right? Or no symptoms, right? The next one is gonorrhea. Sometimes it's nicknamed the drip. And that one can infect any of the mucous membranes in the body. It's the second most commonly reported bacterial STI in Canada. The symptoms include greenish, yellow, whitish discharge, burning when urinating, burning in the throat, or painful swollen testicles, swollen glands in the throat. So again, if you're sexually active, go get tested. Then finally, the last bacterial infection that we're going to talk about is syphilis. Syphilis is a complicated STI because it comes in stages, and this one can actually lead to death when untreated. Syphilis starts with just an open sore called a chancre, and we actually had an outbreak in Grand Prairie. The past couple of years, they were having unusually high numbers of syphilis in Grand Prairie. So syphilis starts with a small chancre, and then it can lead to fever, and then it can go away and be dormant for a while, and then it can go to a full body rash, and then can actually lead to brain infection if left untreated. Now let's get into the viral STI. So viral STIs include HPV, so human papillomavirus. It's kind of like a wart that grows on the genitals. There's no pill you can take to just clear it. They have to be burned off, or you just have to let your body, either chemically or doctor's method, or you just have to let your body clear it. This is what Gardasil is supposed to protect you from. Again, just read the package insert and read up all those details on there, because Gardasil only protects from a couple of the many strains of HPV. That's good to know too, so you don't have a false sense of security realizing there's many different strains of HPV. Next one is herpes. So there's herpes simplex 1 and there's herpes simplex 2. Herpes simplex 1 is just your common cold sore. So the World Health Organization estimates that 2 out of 3 people in the world, so the majority of us, carry that virus in our body. Just like other STIs, well, this one's not an STI because it's your common cold sore. It can flare up when the body is worn out or stressed. Herpes simplex 2 is like cold sores that focus on the genital area, right? Very painful. So again, there's not a pill that you can take. You can just strengthen your body's immune system and hope that your body can fight that off. Then there's hepatitis. So hepatitis has hepatitis A, hepatitis B, which there's a vaccine for, and I think it's required if you travel. And there's also hepatitis C, which there is no vaccine and there is no cure. Hepatitis is like inflammation of the liver. And with like hepatitis C, the liver slowly shuts down. There can be cirrhosis of the liver where it like turns black and becomes completely dysfunctional in the body. And then there is HIV. Now HIV is a lot more complicated and there's a lot more layers than that. I would just encourage you to go check it out on the Alberta Health website. But HIV is serious and can progress to life-threatening conditions. So just in summary, STIs can result in groin pain, burning during urination, milky discharge, irritation, testicular pain and swelling, sore throat, itching, milky discharge for women, burning during urination, lower abdominal back pain, nausea and fever, spotting between periods. Essentially, if there's body fluids coming out that don't make sense, if there's swelling, if there's pain, if there's itching, if there's lower back pain. So be aware, make sure you have a doctor you can talk to. There used to be the term used, have safe sex, right? That was the term used everywhere. And even New York, it was interesting. They decided, you know what, we're gonna just make sure all these students know about safe sex, and we're gonna just push this message so that we can lower STI rates. And they went on this massive multi-billion-dollar campaign years ago to educate all students on STIs and safe sex. Interesting fact though, what happened? It backfired. They actually ended up having higher rates of STIs. So why is that? And it's interesting to note too that now health organizations no longer say safe sex. They say have safer sex. Because in reality, there isn't completely protected sex. Even condoms, although they protect part of the body and lower risk, if you were looking at those pictures I had shared earlier, do condoms cover all those parts of the body? No. You still have risk, and you can still have silent symptoms that can be transmitted. So be aware, know your risk, make good choices there. So there's 2 ways that completely eliminate the risk of STIs other than some fluke tattoo, contaminated tattoo needle incident. One is abstinence for life, the celibate lifestyle. It's not for everyone. And then the other way is to commit to one lifelong partner. And if that person is committed to you as well, STIs do not just form out of nowhere. I've had some interesting ideas over the years from students where they think that an STI could just form if you have sex when somebody's having their period. No, it doesn't work like that. The STI has to be transmitted. It doesn't just spontaneously appear. Lifelong commitment to one person who's committed to you, there's no chance of STIs. So that's good news. Another benefit of commitment there. You get to plan. And I would encourage you to think through all these things we've talked about, weigh the pros and cons of all these different choices you have to make. Get some good information so that you can make informed choices. So that you're confident in the boundaries and the goals you set for yourself, so that when you're in a relationship, you can make healthy choices and you can be setting your long-term goals. Boundaries are not just supposed to be lame. Boundaries are not there just to be rules for the sake of rules so we can feel like life is boring. Boundaries are actually, when they're used at their best, Boundaries propel us forward. They send us toward the goal and the life that we want. So use them well and make relationships that value you and respect you as a heart and a mind and a body, and respect and value your future and your voice. So, thanks for listening.